Alrighty, y'all. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list ranking of one of my favorite fantasy series, more recently that I've read, um, the Osten Ard Saga, or it's split into two series, both Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and The Last King of Osten Ard, with some standalones thrown in. But with the new book in the Osten Ard Saga coming out in just a few months, I thought it was just appropriate that I go ahead and share my opinions in this whole little world of books. And I'm going to be as quick to explain my feelings for each book, and I'll try my best to be spoiler free. And without much further explanation, I guess I'm going to go start with the first book in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which is The Dragonbone Chair. Now, already, I one thing I have to say about Tad Williams as a whole as an author is that I believe he is somewhat underrated. Many authors, famous authors, have credited him as a very big influence for their own fantasy series. One of them in particular being George R. R. Martin. Um, I believe another one, Christopher Paolini. Uh, those are the main two that stick out the most. But it really, I see some people say that he is considered to be your favorite author's favorite author, and that is sadly a good um a good way to describe it. But I just have to say, if this is one way to get the word out on his works, that this would be it. And the Dragonbow Chair, being I believe his second published novel, incredibly impressive. It's just it's your classic fantasy, very Tolkien esque. It's very obvious that Ted Williams grabs a lot of inspiration and influence from Tolkien. I believe he's even credited it himself. Both the Dragonbone Chair, definitely with the world building and the very incredibly polished prose, it is definitely um, apparent. So, where am I going to put the Dragonbone Chair? Well, when I first read The Dragonbone Chair, and this is a sentiment that a lot of people agree with, is that it is a rather slow read. A very slow read, and I would have to agree. Um, Almost a detriment to itself, but there is a good reason for it. This series as a whole can be a bit slow, and not in a bad way, but it is for immersion's sake. And this series, if you let it, will immerse you. I think that's another reason why it isn't as well talked about, especially in modern circles, is because it is rather verbose. I wouldn't say wordy. I don't think any trimming would have to be needed to Tad's work, but I think I'm rambling. With the Dragonbone Chair, I think I'll have to give it a well-deserved A tier. Simply because it may be slow, but it's immersive, introduces you to great, memorable characters, a memorable world, and has a great ending. Though I think all of these have a great ending at the end of the book. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't, and I can't. All of them build up to something. And so with that, Dragonbone Chair gets an easy A. And then we have the middle book of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn being the Stone of Farewell, which I seem to see a lot of people say is their favorite, and I can see why. It is definitely it gives the opposite of middle book syndrome in that it really starts to roll the pacing. Though I would say that most of Ted Williams' books is either slow paced or moderately paced. I have yet to find myself call any of Ted Williams' works fast paced, though some different character stories could be very thrilling. I would not say fast paced. But with Stone of Farewell, we get to see more of the world of Osten Ard, and we get to see more of our characters explore it. More lore is given to us, and especially at the end with our main character Simon, we we finally get to see more of the fantastical side, and it's really good to see. I do enjoy this more than the Dragonbone chair, so it doesn't quite make it to S tier like some people may give it to, but I do think it's definitely above Dragonbone chair, sitting nicely, neatly next to him in A tier. And then for the third and final book in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, I will not be giving it to part one and part two. I'm doing to Green Angel Tower as a whole. Um, this book is one of my favorite books I've ever read, so that should already tell you where I'm going to put it. It is incredibly beefy, with the two paperbacks that I had going up to about 1,600 pages, and the one paperback full volume version having somewhere in the teen hundreds. Very much goes on in this book, but I enjoyed every moment in it. It's what I look for when I want to experience fantasy. It can be characters can have realistic uh, reactions and motivations. It's almost Game of Thronesian, which makes sense because I believe this is the series that gave inspiration to Game of Thrones. But to Green Angel Tower, it pulls from what I love about Lord of the Rings, but grounding it in a way that makes me feel more immersed. Well, more immersed than Tolkien. I know, hot take, but I have read Tolkien and I do feel more immersed by Ted Williams. Hot take, I know. Um, but anyway, To Green Angel Tower is one of my favorite books, and it totally deserves S tier. Maybe even a little bit more if we're comparing it to other books, but To Green Angel Tower deserves S tier. And that so being the final book in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thor trilogy, and now we're going to The Heart of What Was Lost, which serves as a bridge book of sorts between the two series of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and The Last King of Osten Ard. Now, this takes place some small time after the ending of To Green Angel Tower, and it's a rather short read, but it sets up what the next series is going for, and I think it does it very well. One thing I think Tad does really well in this book is the tonal shift, because in the first series of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, it's very, like I said, Tolkien esque. Um, Not as happy go lucky as some like fantasy stories that you see, but it is more hopeful. Um, Heart of What Was in the Heart of What Was Lost, it really takes that like a step down and really says like, no, there are risks involved in this world. Not to say that there weren't darker moments in the original trilogy, but this one kind of pulls into the Game of Thrones grim dark genre, and I kind of like that. I respect it for setting up the next series as much as that. But where would I put this? I think for now I'm going to put it in B tier. Yes. I think it's a good read. I like no matter where I put any of these, even in D tier, Austin Art books is like a recommended read. I really enjoy all of these books, but compared to each other, um, yes. If I had to say anything without going into spoilers, it would be that my favorite portions of The Heart of What Was Lost was is Porto's story with him and the one character he travels with. Oh, the ending of this book. One of ooh, it'll get to you. That is all I will say. And so, bridging from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn to the next series, The Last King of Osten Ard, would be our first book, being The Witchwood Crown. Now, whenever I first got into this, I was really excited because with Tad Williams' approach to telling a series, he tends to want to build up near the beginning portion, and it's going to be really slow. But then the later half, it's like all of the executions of what he is building up, and it's extremely satisfying to see. So with the Witchwood Crown, I thought we already built up the world and we already met these characters in the last series, so I thought we were going to see somewhat of horses out of the gate, not fast paced, but like moderately paced. No, no, no. That's not what happens here. Witchwood Crown is doing what the Dragonbone chair does, and that it sort of lets you get back into the world, reintroduces it in a way, and looking back in hindsight, that is actually a great way to start it because this is, I believe, 20 years after the events of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So I think a moderately paced, already into the adventure oomph that I was looking for would have been probably a bad idea. But for as my experience with the Witchwood Crown, it was great to see these characters again. But you also meet new characters. There are new characters in the series. Of course, there would be. Um, so I found myself very unfairly, really much wanting to read the previous characters' point of views rather than the new characters, and that was an unfair advantage for the new characters. So for that, it tainted my experience. But overall, I think this is a solid work. But because it is still rather slow, just like Dragonbone Chair, and because of the new characters' POVs being somewhat um, less interesting, in my opinion, at the time of reading, I would have to give it a C tier. And I'm sure in a reread, I will definitely like it a lot more. And I'm sure I'll say the same about all of these books. I'm sure there's plenty of foreshadowing that I've missed, but I would just have to say Witchwood Crown gets a C tier, and that is all. And then the second book in The Last King of Osten Ard would be Empire of Grass, which I also see. Um, I see some people online discourse say that either Empire of Grass or Into the Narrow Dark being their favorite of this series, and hmm, Empire of Grass. If the heart of what was lost was a tonal shift, like a setup for a tonal shift in some way, Empire of Grass, the Witchwood Crown was also dark, but Empire of Grass goes darker, even to the point where I would say it tries to be Game of Thrones. And I find it incredibly funny because of its Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn being an influence for Game of Thrones, and now this series is trying to be Game of Thrones. It's like genre feeding onto itself, or influences feeding on influences. I don't mind that. That is to say, I don't mind this. It's just if you're wanting the same tone throughout the entire read through of Osten Ard, it won't probably be the case. But Empire of Grass is still a great read. There's much more political intrigue, just still riffing from the Game of Thrones storytelling. Not to say that there wasn't any um, political intrigue in the previous books, but this one really delves into it, especially within one character in particular. Um, um, from what I remember, without going into spoilers, another great ending, especially the epilogue chapter, a very emotional ending. That really, I'm so glad I had all these books whenever I read them back to back. I don't know what I would have done if I had to wait so long for the next book. But with Empire of Grass, though the darker tonal shift, and I would even say it's the pacing is still like Dragonbone Chair, where it's actually still rather slow. which I still don't mind. It's just I was expecting it to be, the Dragonbone Chair, then Stone of Farewell being moderately paced. I didn't find that here, but I still think it was fine. Um, at this point, I wasn't falling in love with this new series, but I was having fun with it nonetheless. I was entertained. And for that, I will have to give it the end of B tier, right under the heart of what was lost. Now, here we have the Brothers of the Wind, and I did read all of these in publication order, so it was somewhat of an odd jump to go from the second book in a series to this great book of context, because this is what Brothers of the Wind is. It's very much context for what we're about to get in the next two books. Um, at least I believe Brothers of the Wind came. I can't remember if. Oh, because of the way this was set up beforehand. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do Brothers of the Wind now. I wasn't sure. But Brothers of the Wind is set way before the events of any of the books. I believe this is the earliest um, in the timeline we have seen of Osten Ard. And it's still great. Without delving into anything, we learn more about the Scythy. We learn more about what exactly happened with very crucial characters of their whole plot in this, and it makes for the next two books to be even more interesting with a certain character that we meet. It sounds incredibly vague, but if you know, you know. But saying all of that, even though I did enjoy this story, I would have to put it at the bottom. Mainly because I don't think it holds up to the other books in terms of just expansive storytelling from the other books. It quite literally is context the book, not to demean it or degrade it in any way, but that's what it is to me, at least from memory. It's still an enjoyable read, and it's still important for the history of Osten Ard. But because of that reasoning, I have to put it at the bottom. Now, time for the third book in the Last King of Osten Ard, being Into the Narrow Dark. Now, I've seen a lot of people consider this to be the best in the series, of this series, not of Osten Ard in general. I've actually seen some people say that it's their favorite. Um, Very divisive. These two series are. I think it's all of a matter of taste. But Into the Narrow Dark continues on with the darker tone that Empire of Grass set out with, but also kind of goes hand in hand with the more Tolkienish tone, I think. It blends them together rather well. I think this is where the series starts to pick up in the Stone of Farewell pace, moderately paced. It is a shorter book, I'm pretty sure, than the other three books. But with that smaller page count, I think it does well with a greater pace. Also, I'm pretty sure Into the Narrow Dark and The Navigator's Children was originally supposed to be one book, but again, Tad pulled his to Green Angel Tower and split them into two, which is fine. I think Into the Narrow Dark did a good job with differentiating itself with Navigator's Children and being its own not standalone, but its own portion of the story. Fine. Um, Ooh, I think, but I did start to enjoy this book more than the other two, simply because I actually started to like the newer characters more. The newer characters are now standing on their own to where I can enjoy them with their POV without really wanting the older characters. And for that, I started to enjoy the series so much more. Especially two characters in particular. Um, I will not say who, but it is a couple that forms that I actually rather enjoy, and I find some scenes with them to be very humorous, and I like them all more for it. So for that, I have to say I would actually hot take. I'm putting it at top of A above Dragonbone and Stone of Farewell. I just think that this series finally found its footing. It blends together the darker tones, but also that familiar Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn tone together incredibly well. I like all of the characters, and it's an extremely moderately paced book for Tad Williams. I just thought this was an extremely strong entry, but time for the Navigator's Children. Right out of the gate, I'm just going to say this was to me, a satisfying conclusion to the series. But it also sets up, in my opinion, now I think this is like a moderate take to say, it sets up for more stories to be told. And that gets me excited for a possible new series. um, I would very much enjoy that. If not, I would be fine. Very much like To Green Angel Tower, it both sets up like a chance for more stories to be told, but it offers a satisfying conclusion to the story that it was already telling. And for that, I think it just makes Ted Williams, it proves him to be uh, the great storyteller that he is. He plans this extremely well to the point where I uh I wonder if I will ever be that good of a writer one day. Anyway, no. Navigator's Children. Um, Extremely satisfying. I love how many of the character arcs are are overall finished or ended. Uh Now there are a few. There like this series isn't without flaws, especially even in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I think some character endings could have been better handled, but overall, it is satisfying and it makes me excited for the future of Osten Ard as a whole. So for that, I'm not actually very familiar for with a lot of people's opinions because this came out the most recently. Um, I will actually have to sit it right behind To Green Angel Tower. Both of these being the ending of both of their respective series, I think they both land extremely well. I think Tad is one of the best authors whenever it comes to ending his series. He he was Sanderlanching before Sanderlanches were a thing. Especially if we're talking about To Green Angel Tower. Navigator's Children, I felt, was much more akin to Lord of the Rings, where the climax happens, but there's a little bit more, and then we get the ending. To Green Angel Tower, it felt more like here's the explosive ending that you want, and you got it. Not to give anything too much away, but overall, I do believe that this will be my official tier list of the Osten Ard books so far, and I'm extremely excited for this upcoming book, The Splintered Sun, coming out, I believe, this October. And overall, that is that.